welcome to another edition of the
Come on,
Wrap
Oren, have
Up.
some goddamn energy in
I
there. Friday, long weekend.
It screwed up my intro because I was shocked to see 8 loyal Raptors Republic viewers just
Pre
waiting in the
live
weeds.
show.
Yeah, waiting in the weeds for this live show to start. We almost never start on time, but today we did, so I'm happy for those 8 people that we did. I'm Oren. I'm with Aiden here, and we're going to talk about the Donovan Mitchell trade, how it affects the East, whether Toronto should have done it, all that good stuff. Aiden, how's your day going? First, we got to
Great.
banter.
I just had a cup of coffee. I've got a lot of thoughts. I'm ready to roll. It's first time in a while we've gone live too, so I'm feeling like extra spicy. I can feel the kinetic energy of our 6 faithful viewers. Let's go.
Yeah, no, the seven faithful viewers are big time. I went on a long bike ride today. Just got back. Really, as soon as I left the house, my allergies started acting up. So it was a tough bike ride. It wasn't easy, but that's also why I sound a little nasally. So just
Mm.
forgive me. But yeah, let's get into it because I think we have kind of differing views on this.
Yeah.
So as Woj rudely interrupted my day yesterday, with
Can we just
this
can we
trade.
address that a former Raptor Republic guy, was probably more live on Twitter about this trade than me, and it was his
Yeah,
wedding.
yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Actually, we can't even address it.
no, I know we should. It's concerning. It's concerning.
uh, but yeah, S shout out to S. Congratulations for getting
Yeah.
married. Um, yeah, I mean, if his wife now doesn't mind, then hey, we're jealous. Realistically,
It's
that's
true.
all we are. But yeah, so here's the details of the trade. Uh, Donovan Mitchell to Cleveland for Laurie Marketing, Oche Okbaji, Colin Sexton, 3 first-round picks and 2 pick swaps. And then for clarification on those, they are 2020. They're basically as late as they could have possibly gotten them. So I'll just ask for your initial thoughts to the trade first, and then we can go from there.
So when I saw it first go down, I almost, like, I was in a meeting and I almost kind of like had a minor seizure. Like, it really caught me off guard. I was so dead set on the New York Knicks getting Mitchell. Like, I really just didn't even consider anybody else. And this trade, it's a really smart move for Cleveland in the sense that I think they got Mitchell at a cheap price. I tweeted that I was kind of surprised that, like, guys like Laurie you mentioned Okoro. Like, Utah didn't even get Okoro. They didn't even get Love, who's an expiring. They had to re-sign Sexton, which I think goes a little bit against their plan. This kind of looked like a spite trade by Utah. And it was kind of, it's like, oh, New York's getting picky after them, courting Mitchell for the last 18 months. Like, screw you. We're just going to take the lower price. So props to Cleveland for making the move. I would have done the same thing if I were them. The same way, we capitalized on Kawhi. All that being said, I still am not as overwhelmingly intimidated by the acquisition of Mitchell than others might be, and we can get into that in a little bit. But
Yeah.
yeah, but I like, overall, I'm just like astonished by the transaction itself.
Yeah, no, I was too. I was too. When it happened, I didn't believe that it was the real Woj because I keep getting caught on Twitter. Because I mean, yeah, the Knicks were the favorite for sure. I honestly considered the Raptors. Like, I've been very vocal about not believing in this Vision 6-9 thing in terms of like what the front office thinks. I think they are gonna pull off a consolidation trade at some point. So I thought the Raptors were a team that could have gotten in sneakily. There's a couple others. I didn't consider Cleveland strongly just because the backcourt thing, really, just because like they're really young and they didn't feel like a team that was going all in at any point soon, and B, they had already this guy in Garland who, it wasn't heliocentric at the end of the season, but it was pretty close. Like, he had a ton of the ball in his hand, and It honestly looked really good when he had the ball in his hand. Not to say you can't use more ball handlers. I'm gonna argue that you can, but I just didn't see Cleveland like mentioned, and I didn't really consider them. I disagree with you that the price is not hefty though. Like we'll talk about the Knicks deal, and we can honestly do that right now if we want, and
Yeah,
whose we would have taken. But this is not like we would only consider this price not insane this summer. If this happened a year ago, even three first round picks up to 2029, all unprotected, two pick swaps unprotected for Donovan Mitchell, who's an all star but not like a top 10 player, I think that we would be like, yeah, that's way too much. But what Rudy got with what Rudy Gobert got, then it tempers our expectations and like we're like, okay, this is just the price.
yeah, that's true. And it seemed to be with Durant and Mitchell that there was kind of suddenly all of the leverage of the selling team was gone. It was kind of weird. It was like Gobert somehow oversaturated the market that like everybody came away from that being like this is we're reaching the era, or we're reaching a line of absurdity. Like we can't just we like if Gobert is the kind of the line in which we're, or the what we're looking at as the frame of reference, like Kevin Durant and Mitchell are arguably, well, Durant definitely is, and Mitchell probably is beyond that. So what are we looking at? Like 9 picks, 12 picks, and instead it actually kind of um, it it receded, like it came back kind of down to reality. I don't think this is an absurd, like I don't think in a vacuum this trade it is more than we think it is, because first of all, Mitchell is young as well. So you have a core that is all under the age of 25, 26 moving forward. What the unprotected first round picks start in what, 26?
2025.
Yeah, and so like they anticipate re-signing Mitchell and running this core for, I would say, at least 4 to 5 years. So
Yeah.
I think one or two of those picks won't be as valuable as they think. And I guess I'm just more surprised by the players that they got. Like I like Agbaji, but he's definitely or he's projected to be a role player, and I just don't think that Utah wants Colin Sexton or Markkanen. It doesn't really seem to fit what they were looking for. And so the fact that they now have, I think, about 70 million tied up in these two guys. I don't know if Markkanen's tradable. Sexton might be, but Cleveland was trying to ship him for a while and couldn't. So all of a sudden Utah is burdened with contracts that I don't think they necessarily wanted. That's what surprised me.
Yeah, I think they more so just wanted team control for several years, so I don't think they're really mad about Sexton. Because at the end of the day, there is a salary floor you have to hit, and if you don't hit it, then whoever is on your roster still gets paid the outstanding money. Like in OKC last year, I think each roster player got like 2 million at the end of the season extra just because they didn't hit their floor. So it's like at a certain point you have to hit the salary cap. I'm not sure they were that against taking back players.
Yeah, and Sexton's a cheap contract too. 17 million for his production is not bad.
Yeah. Yeah, so like look, I would have done this deal if I was Cleveland, I think, but also I'm not going to act like Utah came out with nothing because A, we don't know is logic, but it is super risky to leverage your future like this. Like there's so many ways that even though you have Evan Mobley and we all believe in Evan Mobley, even with that, there's so many things that can go wrong. Mitchell cannot resign or he can even force his way out before that. I don't think that's happening, but not re-signing is a real possibility. One injury, and then you have a bad season, and then all of a sudden a lottery pick is going the other way.
Yeah,
You
but
know what?
yeah, but you can look at that the other way too, which is like those draft picks are not certainty at all. And we've seen time and again that teams are able to kind of quickly deconstruct, get value. We just saw Utah do it, and then redirect in a couple of years. And Cleveland has so many players now that could, in 3 or 4 years, if they wanted to just build around Mobley and send Garland and Mitchell elsewhere, like they could, and they could get back a lot of those picks that they traded off. So I actually think there obviously injury is something that plausible, but you can't really ever strategize around injury. In fact, you can by having a Mitchell and a Garland that if you lose one of them, you're still like a functional team. But I think the risk is much lower than you're suggesting.
No, I mean, I agree with you just because this was the other offer. You know what I mean? Like, look, if this is just what it is now, and star players are going for every future first round pick a team has, and teams are willing to pay that, fine. Like, I'm not here to say whether or not that should be the price going in the league because that's just what's happening and that's the reality. But okay, if this was your other offer and it's a few less picks, but like RJ Barrett, forget Toppin, who I really like, and Robinson, who I like. RJ Barrett alone is by far like I'm not even going to talk about the keeping Mitchell aspect, which I think the Jazz should have done. But okay, you go through this rebuild. What are the odds one of these picks is going to be better than RJ Barrett? Right? It's like
Yeah.
they're not that high. And then RJ is on this new big contract. Like, why wouldn't you just take this deal, get a couple fewer picks, but just better young players? Ultimately, like that's how I would always go about these things because the draft is a crapshoot.
Yeah, and Barrett, what did Barrett resign for? Like a
Super
hundred.
reasonable deal in my opinion. It's four
Yeah,
years,
well,
like 100 million, could go up to 120.
yeah, it's like 13 mil more than Sexton, but less years. I honestly don't know. They must have evaluated Barrett and considered him not worth the money. Like that's the only conclusion I can come to because he is young. He has the potential to be, probably the second guy on a good team. Um, yeah, I don't really know what happened, but I can imagine that the exchanges just didn't go well, interpersonally, and then that kind of killed the negotiations. But I
Yeah.
agree with you that I think this package is much stronger than Cleveland's.
And not to mention the fact that you're betting against New York, which is a better bet than betting against
Yeah.
Cleveland. Now, you're not betting against them as far in the future, so I get it. But yeah, look, either of these deals I think is a crazy return for Donovan Mitchell. Like this, looking at this is insane to me. RJ Barrett is not that much worse than Mitchell right now. And there's he's younger. Like, okay, I get it. You have to throw in a couple picks because he's not as good. But like three unprotected picks, Toppin and Robert, it just doesn't add up to me.
I don't know. I see again. I disagree. I think Barrett is a good player. He's not great. I think Mitchell is a great player. We've seen in the playoffs that he can literally drag a team into the second round, and there are only a handful of players that you can truly say can do that. We don't really know what Toppin is yet. He showed flashes, but he's an older prospect. He's going into year 3. He still hasn't really cracked the lineup. Mitchell Robinson, same thing. I just don't think that. I actually think this is like about right for Mitchell. If anything, it's a little bit under, just because the only difference is that Utah really wants picks, and so like I think that makes the roster, the players that are traded in the package, less important. But I think Mitchell is deserving of better players being traded for him,
I
because
don't know. It's just when I look back at some of the superstar deals, Anthony Davis to the Lakers,
Davis is a
um,
huge package.
I know, James Harden to the Nets, like they got around similar similar value,
No,
and they're
AD was
better
like 7
players.
picks, wasn't it? And
I
AD
would
and
have to look it up. No,
like
but it was Ingram. Ingram was part of that deal. I
yeah,
think it was a similar amount of picks though.
and Lonzo and Josh Hart and like 5 or 6 picks, and then Paul George,
I don't
same
think
thing.
it's that
Like,
many picks.
well,
Paul George is a different. Like I didn't want to bring up Kawhi or Paul George because they were
but
like unique
but I know, but
situations.
still, like like those guys are the highest caliber of player, and I
Yeah,
think Mitchell is the tier below that, and I think Gobert is the tier below that, and so like I think when you compare it, I think Mitchell is more than what Gobert was worth, and he's just a little bit less than what those guys are worth. And so I just think
Yeah.
this is I don't think this is equal to his value. I think it's a little bit under market, and I think he's been devalued just because of how Utah kind of cratered over the last 2 seasons.
I think he has too, and I'm really high on Mitchell. And like, I guess I'll just say that I wouldn't have done this deal if I was the Knicks. I wouldn't have included this many players for Mitchell. But I would have done the Cleveland deal if I was Cleveland. And
Yeah,
that kind of
interesting.
goes to show that I think the Cleveland deal is a little less value than this one. And also just like the team building, the Knicks are a little bit less far in it than Cleveland. But like either way, I guess my point is just that you really have to leverage your entire future to get a
Yeah,
star now. There's no two picks with light protection. Like the days of that are done.
yeah.
It's now like you gotta just and I'm curious to why that's happening. I don't know if it's because free agency died with all these extensions and now people have to get players in trades. Like I don't I think it's interesting to learn more, but it really feels like the star trade value market has gone up a lot recently.
I don't know if
In
anybody's
terms of
read.
picks, at least, not like it used to be maybe players and a couple picks. Now it's like, give me all your picks.
Well, they're almost becoming empty calories, right? They're so far down the line and so much can happen within the draft itself, but also between then and when the picks come to fruition. I think team, and you see this in football to some degree too. Like the Rams did this where they just basically went all in at the moment to win the Super Bowl. And I think the NBA is kind of realizing that you need to
Yeah,
kind of take what you have now and run with it and worry about what happens later, because there's always an avenue that you can explore. And we're seeing time and again that teams are going from bottom of the league to the higher level much more quickly than it used to be, except for Oklahoma, who's also demonstrating that the just acquiring picks and holding on to them forever is actually not necessarily going to get you anywhere. But the
yeah,
one other thing I was going to say is, um, I'd be interested to write a piece philosophically on the idea of like feudalistic behavior in our generation. Like it's kind of hard to really even conceive of what the future is going to behold. And I say that like really cynically
yeah,
because I am that. But Zach Lowe made that comment kind of flippantly. He's like, yeah, maybe the world's going to be underwater in
yeah.
2033. So who the hell cares about your draft picks? And there might actually be something to that where the future is so unforeseeable that like worrying about a 2029 first round pick is really like inconsequential.
I think that's fair. I also think GMs don't care because they're probably not going to be there in
That
2029.
too.
And I also think if this is the market, like Cleveland, for example, if things do go bad and they have to rebuild all of a sudden, they can just get back this package
That's what
of
I was
picks,
saying.
you know?
Mobley
So
would fetch an Anthony Davis type package in 2 years.
for sure. Uh for sure. So let's move on. I'm gonna check my mic settings here.
What I want to do is
Yeah, you're right.
now,
You're right.
How's that?
ooh, that's sexier.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah, way better.
Well, let's talk about Cleveland, right?
I thought it was your allergies.
Oh
Well,
God.
wait, before we do that,
Okay.
should we talk about the Raptors or should we talk about Cleveland?
Let's do Cleveland and then get into the Raptors. I
Okay.
think.
Okay.
So I'm gonna pull up
Let's
their
do
depth.
let's do the Raptors because the faithful here are probably more interested in the Raptors than they are Cleveland, I think.
Yeah,
I just
think
want to say quickly what now that we know what New York was offering and what Cleveland traded, what would be
Okay.
the Toronto equivalent and would you do it? That's what I'm curious. So it's 3 picks.
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot. Okay, let me put up
How
a
much
banner.
on your bike ride, or are you just kind of like
Oh man.
thinking
Honestly,
about it?
yeah.
It's good times.
Okay. How's that banner? Yeah, at first I thought yes, I would, because again, I think the Raptors are going to be good for a long time with Barnes in tow. So I'm not too worried about those picks and stuff, right? The problem with doing a deal like this for the Raptors is it's and same with Cleveland, is it's your last swing, right? Like Cleveland now has literally no picks to trade. The Raptors would be in a similar situation if they did a deal. I think the equivalent would be Gary Trent Jr.
So Sexton is Gary Trent Jr.
Yeah, and then there's no OG level player, so we're not going to go
Right.
there.
That's
It would be Gary Boucher or something. He can't get traded right now, but something like that. Malachi and a bunch of picks, same amount of picks.
Yeah, so the Lauri Markkanen is like it's more about salary filler than it is
Yeah,
talent, right?
yeah,
And I think Boucher is better than Markkanen, but it's that you're right, it's that level. OG is well
and
above
Gary is
Markkanen's level.
better. Gary's better than Sexton.
That's arguable. That's
Okay, fine.
contextually
Whatever.
arguable.
We're not making the exact deal. We know
No, I know
around
that.
what it would be.
I'm saying tier wise, they're about the same.
Yeah. The only reason, like, I was in for the Raptors to get Mitchell, but if I had, now that I know the price, I would say no. And again, it goes back to what I said about Kevin Durant and a guy like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. It's just if you have one chance to swing for the fences, I don't want it to be Donovan Mitchell. And that's because we talked about this when we did the Durant pod, I think. It was just like a guy like Mitchell of his caliber comes up every offseason. And not necessarily a guy who would fit as well as Mitchell would on the Raptors, because I think he really fills a lot of needs that they don't offensively. He would just be a perfect fit. But I would just rather hold on to my chips and wait for Durant to come available again, to be honest with you. Like what are we doing here? Like Kevin Durant, I know Raptors fans were like all against this, but like, would you rather give up the same picks package for Kevin Durant or Donovan Mitchell?
Well, the thing is
Same package.
Brooklyn's never selling low on Kevin Durant. Or whatever low
That's
is to
not true.
Kevin.
There's a history of stars eventually getting their way out for less than market value.
Okay, so you're right. Less than market value, but not at a price that Mitch like to me the biggest differentiator right now is OG is a Raptor with Mitchell on the team.
Yeah.
And I possibly like I don't know that we could have bested Cleveland's offer, especially with Abaji being in the deal. But theoretically, if we're holding on to OG and we're getting Mitchell, I'm taking that like 1,000-fold over losing OG and Gary for Kevin Durant. I just am. Like I believe that much in OG, and I think OG unlocks like one of the biggest problems to me with Brooklyn last year was that Kevin Durant was their primary defender. And like that would not be the case coming to Toronto, but OG is the linchpin. And I encourage everybody to read Lou Zatman's piece that just came out the other day on OG and his contributions on both ends of the floor. But defensively, I think he is the linchpin to Toronto's defense. And losing him just throws us into a space I don't necessarily want to be in.
Yeah, I mean, my rebuttal would be that he could walk in a year or two when his contract's up, and then you lose him for nothing. That's a real possibility. And B, my main thing is just this, okay? You trade for Donovan Mitchell, you have Mitchell and Fred in the backcourt, and then you got OG, Siakam, Barnes, Achua, whatever. That's not a championship team to me. It's a really good one, but I don't think it's a championship team. However, I do think Kevin Durant with the Raptors is a championship team. And that just comes down to, do you have a top 5 player? Do you have a number 1 option who can be the best player on a championship team? Like, it's never that clear cut and simple. Of course, there's been teams that have won other ways, but I'm going to bet on that version of a team going to the finals rather than what Mitchell would be, which would be a mishmash of a bunch of good players, but no top level superstar.
Yeah, I just think that Toronto is carving a new path. And you're right, traditionally you've had a top 5 superstar to win the championship. That's just been basically true. Although last year Boston was there, and there have been other teams that were there, like Phoenix and Miami, who didn't and were close. And they did that, by committee. And Toronto has a type of committee that I think at the peak of their powers could get there, but they need a guy who can go and get you 40, especially in the playoffs when the offenses, grind to a halt. And Mitchell has proven that he's capable of doing that, even with a guy like Gobert on the floor, who's a complete zero on offense. And so while I do agree with you that it's Toronto biding their time for the perfect superstar makes a lot of sense, I think with Mitchell and the right pieces around him, again, that's why I didn't want to trade everything we had for him. But if we could get him, keeping OG, keeping Precious, I think that's a finals contending team.
Yeah, I think it could get there. I just don't think they'd be favorites. But honestly, I would agree with you that I would rather do one of those deals than none, which the Raptors didn't do anything this offseason. That's fine. I get it. But if you're asking me, would you rather have Kevin Durant or Mitchell for the package that Utah just gave up or an equivalent, or just go into next season building, I would say I would rather have one of those star players, of course. I think they're both good fits, and I think they would both make the Raptors legitimately better. And ultimately, that's what you're trying to do. You're not always trying to take that step right towards contention. It doesn't happen that way, but you're trying to get better every season. And I would have loved to have Mitchell on this team.
Yeah, it would have been
for
really
a similar
fun
package. It would have been scary, but again, you have Barnes, which is the backup for things to never go really south. And then you also have the Canadian angle, which is I think the perfect young guy to trade for is definitely SGA, but there's also a world in which the Raptors go for one of these superstars. It doesn't pay off. The window falls apart. They mess on the window. They trade their stars, the older stars. They go into a rebuild with Barnes, and then a Canadian guy comes and signs in free agency. I totally think that's a real possibility too. If you're leveraging your future, you kind of have a little bit of not safety there, but hope at least.
Yeah.
Are you ready to talk about the Cleveland thing? Because I have a way to kind of transition that I want to do.
Sure. That
Okay.
doesn't sound much like a transition, but
So I thank you, Logical Raptors fanatic, for this comment, because I wanted to bring it up today, and I would have forgotten probably. So let's talk about how good Cleveland is going to be next season and how much we fear them from a Raptors standpoint, from an Eastern Conference
or
standpoint, and all
not
that.
fear them.
Yeah, because I really do fear them, but at the same time, I did want to make this point that the Raptors are in a lot of ways a perfect matchup to exploit their weaknesses, because this is going to be a team, obviously offensively, I think they're going to be really good. Defensively, as a pick and roll defense, I think they're going to be really good for reasons we can talk about. But this is the type of team that can exploit them, is just really a mismatch hunting team, because now you have two targets. And I think I think if you ask me right now who's going to finish ahead in the regular season, I would say Cleveland. But in a playoff series, I think I would take the Raptors, just because they can feast in the post against these smaller players. And then if you're going to double team the Raptors, all of these guys, whether it's Scotty or OG or Siakam, they're really good. They're really good playmakers for the most part. And not just that, is Cleveland going to be able to double and rotate out? Do they have the personnel to double and rotate out like that? I don't really think so. Again, I think they'll be a good pick and roll defense, but I think that's the way to exploit them.
Yeah, the only problem with that is that you do have two top tier shot blockers in the paint. So I mean, and I think OG's kind of demonstrated this, that even when he is pounding a defender in the paint, running into help side is going to be an issue, and making the right pass. And I think some players like Scotty and Pascal are better at that than others, but they're going to probably be matched up to Mobley. And I don't know who Pascal would match up to. Probably Mobley, and then Scotty, maybe a Okoro. So I don't think it's as easy as saying let's find a little guy and punish him, especially if we have Gary and Freddie. That's Mitchell and Garland matching up to them, and that's not the worst case scenario for them.
No, but I actually do think it would be as easy as that because you could just put a bigger lineup out there with OG at the 2 and Gary not out there,
And
right? And
Precious.
Precious is out there. So
Yeah.
now one of those little guys has to defend an OG
Yeah.
size player.
Or
And
you just pick and roll it into it.
yeah, you just pick and roll it into a switch eventually. Or you manufacture switches other places.
I mean, let's be honest. I agree with you. And I tweeted when the trade happened that I'm not that afraid of this. Like, it's scary, and Mitchell can have a series where he literally just torches everybody and the series is over. And I think Toronto is more susceptible to that than other teams because we don't have that that next gear offensively yet where we can, throw up 120 in a playoff game and go toe to toe the way like Denver did with Utah, for example. And so that part's scary to me, that like the offensive ceiling of this Cleveland team is now much higher than ours, but their defensive floor
I love
is.
how we're arguing the opposite things that we were supposed to.
I know. Well, I mean,
That's my bad. I came into it with this Raptors angle.
you were what was our original positions?
I think Cleveland's going to be really good next year, and you are not quite as scared as them.
And then you started arguing.
But I do think if you're gonna beat the Cavs next year, it's to do it with the type of personnel that the Raptors have.
Yeah, so I did a little bit of research on this like defensive
But yeah, let's
thing.
ignore the Raptors standpoint and let's just talk about like how good the Cavs are gonna be.
Yeah, so let's start like defensively because this is where I did the research. But so I looked just quickly at cleaning the glass of the on-offs. And, with Mitchell on the floor and Utah's starters, they were in the 61st percentile. And then with Spider off the floor, they were the 84th percentile. With Donovan Mitchell on the floor, just generally, they're a 51st percentile defense. So that was last year. People have said that Mitchell's capable of defending at a higher level than he's demonstrated. Maybe he was like half checked out. Who knows? I don't know. And also, I don't really know what that means going to Cleveland because Cleveland had the 89th percentile on defense. You're basically swapping Sexton for Mitchell, and they actually have a very similar profile. Sexton's a little bit skinnier, but they're the same height, and Mitchell's a little bit longer. But the difference is that when Garland and Sexton were on the floor, they were a 92nd defensive rating percentile, despite being a small backcourt. So what does it say about? Does it say more about Sexton? Does it say less about Mitchell? I'm not really sure. But I think there is a world where even this small backcourt it's still a good defense even with the small backcourt. Because my point is I think when people were analyzing this trade, they were coming up with they're so small, they're both 6'2", 6 feet, they're going to get punished. And Cleveland figured it out last year where actually the smaller lineup, whether it was Rubio, Garland, or Sexton, Garland, were able to survive.
I thought you were going to argue that they're not. You're supposed to argue the opposite, man.
I know, but I've slowly convinced myself that it's possible that they can do it.
Okay, well, I'll take the other position because Sexton was actually a decent defender last season. Like,
yeah,
I remember watching some games and just he really made a switch at some point during that season and bought into the defensive end of the floor and was just like dogging ball handlers. And I've never really seen Mitchell do that. So that would just be my rebuttal. But yeah, you're right that if two guys with the same size can be on the floor and have that good of a defensive rating, it just goes to show what Cleveland's front court is capable of more than anything.
Exactly.
Which is the reason I think that Cleveland's going to be really good next season. Like, it doesn't matter to me that these guys aren't good defenders against most teams because you're going to have two elite defenders in the front court and like Okoro, who's a pretty good defender for wings. And this is why I said they'll have a good pick and roll defender. Is just like, okay, you put probably traditionally you're going to put what's his name in it? Jared Allen in the pick and roll, right? Mm-hmm. And then whatever, he's going to drop and he's going to provide really good rim protection dropping. Or if that's getting torched with pull-up threes, he's going to hedge or he's going to trap, whatever. Now you have Mobley coming from the weak side, or regardless, he's the low man, and he's stepping in to help on that pick and roll. And so that's just like such an elite combo to have in that way, right? Where, and they can also station it so that they can try to make it he's the weak side guy, so he's stepping in to protect the basket on those pick and rolls. And I just think like having those two to where anytime one of them is in the action, the other guy is like a Giannis type rover out of the action. That's just an elite defensive combination, which makes me not too worried again for the Mitchell and Garland pick and roll defense. Even if they're chasing over that screen and not being that effective, like that's okay. It's not the end of the world. But again, it goes back to my point where I can see them getting exploited is in the post in mismatches.
Yeah, and this is a dumb answer, but it really might just come down to shooting too. Like because
for offenses,
that kind of defensive setup, kind of like Boston, is probably most vulnerable at the mid range or on like a rotation corner three, because you have a guy like Time Lord, and in this case Mobley, selling out on the baseline. You're going to have maybe that corner open, and Pascal has shown that he can be destructive. I don't know why we're doing it in the frame of only Toronto, but this is how we look at everything. But I mean, I think that is going to be one of their weaknesses is getting those guys in isolation and just shooting over them. So that's one way you could beat up on them through the pick and roll, is getting that
But
switch.
we also know that isolation offense is not particularly effective, right? Until it comes down to the last 5 minutes of an NBA game. Like if you run ISO and your whole strategy is like, let's shoot over Garland and Mitchell, that's just not a good way to go about your offense to beat them.
Yeah, I agree. And then I think it remains to be seen about Okoro. Like it's not like Markkanen was this great like three. In fact, he wasn't.
Yeah.
But he was able to create for himself, and he is a high volume 3-point shooter. I don't know how his percentage was last year, but typically speaking, he is. And Okoro hasn't been. And Cedi Osman is on like year 8 of demonstrating that he's a capable 3. Dean Wade is there. Like I think that's kind of the vulnerability of this team. And again, it goes back to OG, because you say this about most teams. They don't have that bona fide 3 who can like be the linchpin defensively, but then go down to the other part of the floor and score. And I think that we saw that same fallibility in Utah, where they had Bog, but he was never Bojbog
in Utah.
Yeah. Bojan. Bogdan?
No, Bogdan.
Bog. He was the best answer at the 3, and maybe Ingles, but not really. And that just always came back to hurt them when push came to shove. And I think that will be Cleveland's weakness moving forward, that they were going to have to rectify. Like Okoro really is going to be a big part of all of this, because Abaji was supposed to be that guy.
Yeah.
Even though he was a rookie.
Sure.
Forgot about LeVert.
Sure. But here's why I'm not like that worried, and why again I think Cleveland's gonna be a really good at least regular season team next season, is because like Okoro, if he does start, which I would probably peg him there, but again, Cedi, I think it's Cedi, by the way. He could start. Dean Wade could even start. LeVert could start. Regardless, like Okoro is their 5th option, right?
Yeah.
So now like Mitchell just takes so much away from what Okoro has to do. Literally all he has to do is hit some spot up threes and defend.
Yeah.
So it's true that I don't like their wing depth is one of the worst in the league, but Mobley can do a lot of things that wings do, which is big, even though he's a forward. And then I do think like Cedi and Dean Wade, that's not terrible depth. And then LeVert to me is the big, like, they're going to trade LeVert and try to get a wing. Like, that's the obvious thing they do this season. He's an expiring contract. He's no longer really needed, because they're just going to stagger Mitchell and Garland to have them. Well, one of them's going to be on the court all game, I think. You trade LeVert, you get a wing, even if it's like, whatever. Like, imagine like a Jeremy Grant type player there. Like, this team to me, it just has, again, it's like for a regular season team, especially, like this graphic shows, like they're gonna be so good offensively now,
Yeah.
and then they have last season they were amazing defensively that I don't think they'll drop that much off. I think they'll win a lot of games.
Yeah, this graphic, I don't know, is this going on the podcast? But Cleveland is 26th in drive points, 20th in made threes, and 25th in points. And Donovan Mitchell was 6th in the league in drive points, 8th in made threes, and 10th in points. So he fills major voids for this team. So yeah, offensively, there's no question. Like you said,
I bet it would have looked the same for Toronto. Would have looked real similar.
Yeah, it definitely would have. I mean, Cleveland and Toronto were very similar in a lot of ways, at least offensively. But yeah, I mean, I think you're right, and I think you're right to say that regular season this team is going to be very dangerous, and it just kind of remains to be seen in a 7-game series where if someone mentioned in the comments like teams don't really win where your best player is a guard. I mean, I don't know that's necessarily true. Like we just saw Golden State win, but it's certainly a lot harder when size, like little things like size, come into play, especially on the defensive end.
The physicality, right? I think
Yeah.
that's the biggest thing, is that shooting drops off in the playoffs because guys are allowed to be more physical, and then guys can't get to their spots as well. So yeah, I think that's probably where that comes from. But again, we've seen Donovan Mitchell do some pretty crazy things in the playoffs.
Agreed. Do we exhaust everything? Should we
I
ask
think
some
so.
questions?
Do you think that the Raptors will finish ahead of them in the standings or behind them next season?
I think they're going to be slightly behind them.
Yeah, me too.
Like 5-6, 4-6,
Yeah.
something like that. Maybe before we leave, we can, because we're live, we can ask if anybody has any questions that they want answered.
Yeah.
We won't do too long because it's Friday evening on a long weekend. So shame on all of us for being here right now. Yeah. Any questions? Otherwise, we're out of here.
Anyone going to the Bad Bad Not Good concert tonight in
Dude,
Toronto?
that's gonna be fly. So they don't rap themselves, do they? They're just instrumental.
Yeah. But I'm
they
sure
bring
they're gonna
rappers
have.
in.
I'm sure they're gonna have some guests. It's not just rappers. Like Charlotte Day Wilson is on a few of their songs,
Right?
but they do have a lot of rappers too. So I'm sure they'll have some guests show up there. So I'm looking forward to it.
How would you rank the East? Like, do you have them in tiers?
Okay.
Do you have definitive 1 to 8?
No, I mean, but I'll go off the top of my head. To me, it's like Boston and Milwaukee are a tier. And then after that, if we're doing regular season,
Yeah, only.
I'll go Philadelphia third. I'll probably go Cleveland fourth, Miami fifth, Toronto sixth. Oh, Brooklyn seventh. Brooklyn seventh, and Atlanta eighth. I'll do something. Chicago ninth. I guess Chicago's ninth. That's tough.
Chicago's really on health.
It's stacked. Like
it's
the
really
East
troublesome.
Is stacked. Yeah, we did the over under pot. I don't really believe in Brooklyn, but if you do, then the East is even more. Like for Toronto to get a non-playoff spot, it's gonna be really tough.
Yeah, go to the Raptors Republic YouTube page. All of our over-unders, we did it by division, so you can check those out. I'm going to go by tiers. So I actually think it's Milwaukee, Boston, and Philly. I think Philly is that much better this year that they're going to be at that top level. And then the next one's just a jumble of Cleveland, Miami, Raptors, Brooklyn. And then I have below that Atlanta and Chicago. And then below that, I have Detroit. I think Detroit could be sneaky fun.
Yeah, same.
So yeah, it certainly vaults Cleveland up. I didn't really feel that great about their team moving into the season. So that's
also where it goes back to like, would you have pulled this swing if you're the Raptors? It's like Cleveland looked at their position as a play-in team, and they were like, we don't want to do that again. we want to take this jump forward even though we're young. The Raptors looked at themselves as a play-in team and said, we believe in our internal development. We're going to be that much better just internally, even though Scotty and Mobley are very similar guys in terms of like their potential. And we're just going to go into next season and try to launch ourselves above that play-in spot just through internal growth. And like those are two opposing ways to go about team building at this point. Especially considering the Raptors are the older team and like have more reason to go all in.
But the other thing is, I think like I don't know that Mobley's ever going to be a self-creating monster, and I think Scotty could be, and so there might be more of a rationale to get a playmaker like Mitchell on the team within the same age range, because again, Mitchell's pretty young, as opposed to Scotty might just need role player guys around him. Yo, Top Shot
Tesla's back.
Let's go. Just
you
press it. Just throwing out the cash.
Raps will finish top 5. You heard it here first. No, they're also I wanted Mitchell anyways though. Okay, well if you guys wanted to hear how we felt about should the Raptors have traded for Mitchell, go back to about the 20-minute mark in this podcast, 15-minute mark. We talked about it. Thanks so much for the tip. I don't want to run too long. Are there any other questions we didn't get to though that you saw?
We're going to talk.
How do you guys feel about the Knicks in the standings?
We're also regarding the training camp stuff. We're going to talk about that closer to training camp.
Yeah. The Knicks, I said on the pod, I took their over betting that they were going to bet on Mitchell or get Mitchell when we did the podcast, but I still think the Knicks are going to be like better than they were last year. Like they're not going to be a playoff team, but yeah, I could totally see them being like the 9th or 8th seed or 10th seed in the East and getting a play-in spot. Like I think they'll be better than they were last year.
I'll tell you, if you do Dynasty Fantasy, I would keep my eye out on Quentin Grimes, because he apparently was the whole reason why the trade fell through between New York and Utah. New York was unwilling to put Grimes in that trade, despite being willing to trade quickly and Obi Toppin. They didn't want to trade Grimes. So that's really interesting to me. He had a great summer league, but I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. So yeah, that's something to keep an eye out.
It doesn't, but look, everyone's shitting on the Knicks for not getting the guy that clearly they wanted and wanted to be there. But I mean, Zach Lowe said this on his podcast, and I totally agree. Like they drew a line in the sand already. I thought what they offered was a lot. They drew a line and they didn't go above it. Like that is competent.
You don't negotiate with terrorists, man.
Exactly. That's competency. I don't know why everyone's mad at the Knicks for holding on to their assets for another star. Like they're gonna be fine. They're too young anyways to make a move like that. And again, someone else said this. There's gonna be better fits than Mitchell would have been in New York because they don't have the infrastructure to like back up a guy, a backcourt that's that small. And there's gonna be a wing that comes available, a center that comes available, whatever it is. So yeah, we'll go out on Danny Ainge is in fact a terrorist. Honestly, I hate everything Utah has done. I hate everything the Spurs are doing. I hate everything about the Thunder other than Shea. Tanking teams, like teams that go into these types of tanks where it's legit just like, we're okay being bad for 5 years. You know what? I hate you. Do it in 1 year like the Raptors.
I want to know, like, is it really worth it, Oklahoma, to like in 10 years from now have like a good team? Is it worth 9 years of garbage to potentially be like contending for the next 3 years? Because I would argue it's not. I go into every year with Toronto, or at least the last several years, legitimately thinking that they could make a run in the playoffs. You go into the, like, why would I even watch basketball if my team is Oklahoma? Like, what am I looking for? Absolutely nothing. I'm just hoping they don't get injured. Oh, wait, that happened to my second pick overall. So I think the league needs to do something about it, because it's gamifying a system that was never meant to be gamified, and it's destroying the content and value of the league, which is about entertainment. And
I agree. It hurts as a Raptors fan, honestly, because I have to now. How many times is it? Like eight games a year. I have to watch the Raptors play crud.
Yeah.
Where it's not even like a fun watch.
No.
Shout out again, Top Shot Tesla. When are we live next? We're gonna have a couple more videos next week for sure. We're gonna do 2 more drafts with Sahal and maybe Kyle. So look out for those. Also, Samson Folk. I'm really liking his Raptors Republic
He's on
series so
tour.
far. Yeah, doing the 29 teams and what opposing media members think about the Raptors. I've found that. So go watch that on the RR channel if you're looking for content.
And regarding SGA,
SGA
like
probably
Oren
doesn't
has
like
been
it.
riding the SGA train forever now for him to come in Toronto. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it. Like he's in year 5 and potentially could get shut down again. It's actually crazy.
Yeah, but this is again why I said I don't think they can do it again. So we'll
But
see
there's no
how
reason
this
not
season
to.
goes.
I'm
Yeah,
just
the
saying.
reason not to is because you're gonna piss off your franchise player. Right?
Yeah, but if I were him, I would have been pissed off a long time ago.
Yeah. Again, like OKC can redeem themselves and trade all those future picks for a couple stars, put them around SGA and Giddy and say, let's go. But I have no faith that they're going to do that this season because they want Wemby. So fine. Anyways, we've done enough OKC slander.
Oh, I just get so mad.
Last look for questions.
Or tips or likes
Question
and
is, what
subscribes.
star is going to become available? I mean, it's always impossible to predict, but I think you can predict that someone will.
I need to
Right?
look at the
Like KD. I personally think KD and Kyrie are going to become available again within the next calendar year.
I don't think this is a star, but I would keep an eye on Michael Porter Jr. I don't trust that dude. He's like a Bible thumping anti-vaxxer, and he just looks like a guy who wants to get somewhere where he can be his own guy. And I don't think he loves the fact that the sun shines on 2 other guys ahead of him. So I could see him getting disgruntled and potentially getting shipped.
Yeah. What about
No offense to
OG?
Bible thumpers. I'm just saying, like, it's an archetype that I don't trust on a basketball team.
What
AKA
about OG?
Jonathan Isaac.
Is OG a star that could become available?
Don't say that. Don't you dare say that.
That's my bad.
Wait, I'm looking
Who
at
else,
teams for
though?
stars. Yeah.
Oh, Dame. Dame could become available. I could see that for sure. Joel Embiid, 100% see that.
No.
You don't see that? Not the
No.
next star, but yeah, if this doesn't work out with Harden,
I think if anything, it's Harden. History shows that it's going to be Harden again.
If it's Harden again, though, then he's not going to have value on the market, and it's just going to be like, okay, look, Embiid's going to look around and say, yeah, I have Maxey. What else? And he's going to realize this, so much of this depends on Harden being good for the next few years that I truly think Embiid could ask out in the next year or 2.
I can see it, but I also think that he's well situated. He strikes me as a guy who's just like,
he's not well situated, dude. Sure, like the Philadelphia angle, they love him, but he has reasonable to complain and be like, look, you never put a team around me that can compete for a title.
They fucked up multiple times. Yeah,
exactly. So
I think my prediction is Anthony Davis. I think if LA has another just horrid year, they could look at LeBron or they could talk to LeBron or not and just decide that Anthony Davis is not the guy that we traded for anymore. Yeah. Whether it's injury or just lack of effort, whatever, I could see him getting shipped and then they doing a quick reset.
Yeah, he does fit into the height that the Raptors target, more or less.
I would love to have Anthony Davis. But who are you trading for Anthony Davis? I don't know.
Well, that's the thing. If he gets traded, it's probably because he has a bad year again. And then it's like he has all these injury concerns. I don't know if I would want to be the team that trades for Anthony Davis, to be honest with you. What about in Chicago? I could see that going south pretty quickly.
They got to get off Vooch hard and fast. That trade is going to look real ugly in a year or two, even
Yeah.
worse than it does already. I like that. If they had held on to Wendell Carter Jr. and everything else had been the same, we would be talking about them, I think, as a top 5 East team this year.
Yeah, but I think if things go really south in the next year or two, like I think DeMar will be out of there. I think they'll reset it around like
Lonzo, Levine, and Caruso, and Will. He will.
and Will, yeah,
Like
exactly. And
they
maybe
would
even yeah,
they
probably
would have had
Levine, but
Franz, right? If they hadn't traded Wendell Carter Jr.
yeah, I don't know where that pick landed.
I
But
think they would have had Franz, or because Suggs was 4th overall, or 5th overall, and then I think Franz was 7th or 8th. So,
oh, this is a good one. De'Aaron Fox, totally agree. He will be next couple of years.
that is a good one.
I think
love
he
De'Aaron
represents
Fox.
a similar like fit in Toronto as Donovan Mitchell would, and I think the price would be way less. Not to say he's as good as Mitchell, but he does a lot of, other than the shooting, like he does a lot of things similarly.
Fox is the John Wall to Mitchell as the Beal. Like he's much more up and down, not a
Yeah.
shooter, reliant on transition. And Toronto loves that shit, but we don't really need that if we have Freddie. That means we're basically getting off Freddie and trying to get younger.
Yeah, no, I'm yeah. We're not gonna get into this right now. I don't want to talk about how he would fit beside Freddie, but for another time.
Go get drunk and listen to good music.
All right. Thanks all for watching, for commenting, and all that good stuff. Again, we're going to have a couple more videos out next week on the RR YouTube channel. Samson Folk is dropping a bunch of videos on that channel. Mac has podcasts. So yeah, subscribe to the channel. We would really appreciate it. We're going to have a lot of good stuff this season. All right. Bye.